Beginning, so I want to thank, I will keep my thanks to our wonderful musicians to the end, but for now I want to welcome you all very much. It is my great pleasure and honor to chair tonight's evening, and my name is Gisela Holfter. I'm teaching at the University of Limerick, and I have had the pleasure of coming to the Heinrich Böll Weekends frequently. I think I could be called a repeat offender, and every time I'm coming, there are new acquaintances. Every time I'm coming, I see people again I like very, very much, and for some strange reason, I only see them once a year here on Ekel Island. And every time I'm in awe of the fantastic work that is done here by the Heinrich Böll Association. So I want to thank the association for their fantastic work. Tonight, I welcome especially René Böll and Zanna Böll, and I think it's very special to have the Böll family here, and I would see René also as a part of this Heinrich Böll Weekend over the years, and a very important part. I want to also welcome especially Chloe Fagan from the Goethe Institute, and I want to thank the Goethe Institute and the German Embassy for their support for the weekends and all the other supporters. So for now, I will read a short part of Maren Wurster's work. She can't be with us tonight, unfortunately, due to her son was suddenly very sick and she couldn't travel here, but I had met her in preparation for tonight, and she had told me how much she was looking forward to coming. So we checked whether she would be happy to have a part of her work read so that she would be represented, and she said she would be delighted. So I'm going to do that before I then pass on to our two key readers tonight, and I will introduce them briefly before, and in between we'll have some music, then there will be some questions or discussions, and then it's open to everyone. So this is about the format for tonight, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I will start with a short piece from Maren Wurster's novel The Stagger, which is called in German Papa stirbt, Mama auch. And the German title already gives away the contents of the book. I go down through the stairwell to the first floor of the hospital. The glass doors are difficult to open. I pass a lift. The door to the visitors' toilets is ajar, and cold black night shines out. I walk past the operating rooms. There are hospital beds outside. The colorful numbered signs on the mattresses irritate me every time. Rubbish is piling up in the bins at the end of the wing. A transparent fluid drips from the black plastic bag onto the floor, pooling. I walk through the first double doors into intensive care and push the bell before I've even disinfected my hands because I want to see you so urgently. I wait until the nurse has left your room. You're lying quietly. I walk up to the bed and touch your arm. Dad, it's Maren. Can you hear me? You make a vague noise, your lips barely opening. Marile, it might have been, with your weakened tongue. My heart is thudding. I can feel my agitation. Your eyeballs shift beneath your lids. You're trying to lift them. You can't. Dad, listen carefully. I know I have to ask this. It's why I came. I prayed for it, to God and to Auguste, your mother, for a lucid moment with you. You nod weakly. I bend down close. What do you need from me? What do you want? Your crusted mouth opens, the lips cracked, dry scraps of skin shaped into dark, sticky crumbs. Your tongue is a garish red. To die, you say, softly, but clearly. And something in me releases, something almost like joy. I felt those words already, and they come as a relief. Here or somewhere else, I ask. Yes, you say. Here, I ask. Already you're drifting back into sleep. I want everything switched off, I tell the doctor. If we switch off the adrenaline now, the doctor says, pointing to a large syringe attached to the wall, then we can't keep his circulation going. The digital display on the syringe says 0.5. A machine injects the adrenaline steadily into your veins. The doctor touches your upper arm, letting his hand rest there, one finger grazing your skin. It's a good-looking doctor, the young one. As soon as I arrive, he comes over to your bed. I like him, he likes me too. Once, when I was crying, he pulled his mask aside to answer me. Just as I thought, his lips are full and lovely. He's always suggesting what he could do to help you, like escalating the antibiotics, as he calls it, which will then be the maximum dosage as far as I can tell, or draining the fluid in your side to ease your breathing. This requires a minor intervention, to which I agree. He informs me of the possible complications, which seems ridiculous to me in light of the overall situation. And it shows me that the doctor doesn't see what I think I see, what you've just told me. He doesn't see that you want to die and the machines are holding you back, that an old man with terminal cancer shouldn't be in intensive care unit at all, where even the young people shout and scream, especially when night falls and the light dims, hello or help. You waited until I was back from holiday. I'm just unpacking, a mountain of laundry next to the washing machine, when I get your phone call from the nursing home. You're crying down the line. For the second time in my life, I hear you cry. The first time I was still a child, and you sat in an armchair and cried before you thought there was something wrong with your heart. I was horrified, the way you grabbed your chest and wept. It really took you. You went into hospital, got treated, and now you have chest pains again and you're back in hospital. I get another call in the night from the good-looking doctor, perhaps to say, your husband is currently stable. You mean my father. You waited until I was back from holiday and then wanted to die. That's what I think, so I can take care of Mum, so that you can let her go. And now I'm staring at the syringe on the wall. If I watch for long enough, I can see the plunger bearing forward and the fluid disappearing. I don't know if I should put an end to what would have finished long ago without intensive care, or even if I can. In the last 2 years, I've kept picturing myself at your bedside, holding your hand as you die. Years before that, I waited for the call from a paramedic telling me you'd fallen, you'd collapsed or had a heart attack, that you had died without me. It never crossed my mind that I would have to bring about your death, a death without that paradoxically is now interrupted only by the machines and medications and injections. If the antibiotics work, we'll buy him some more time, the doctor says. Weeks, maybe a month. With you, with his wife. At what cost, I ask. The doctor nods. Will he be lucid again, I ask, because for me the worst thing is your bleared mind. The doctor moves his head up to down and left to right. So that was Maren Worster's section. to introduce Zanna Sloniowska, who is a Ukrainian-Polish novelist. She's born in Lviv. She won the Znak Literary Prize for her novel The House with a Stained Glass Window in 2015, and the Conrad Prize for the Best Polish Literary Debut of 2016. The novel was also shortlisted for the Dugort in 2016, and there's a lovely quote from Eileen Battersby, the late Irish Times literature review in the Financial Times. Few novels will engage the heart and mind as cohesively as the emphatic performance that triumphs through the depiction of the human stories overshadowed by history. The novel has been translated into 10 languages so far, among them English, French, and German. Zanna was a guest of various literary festivals in Europe, South Africa, and India. She's author of theatrical plays and books for children. She also writes reviews for newspapers, the New York Times, La Presse, Gazeta Wyborcza, sorry for the pronunciation, and teaches at the Department of Polish-Ukrainian Studies at the University in Krakow. And I want to read two more quotes because I thought they were so nice, and they're from one from Olga Tokarczuk, the Nobel Prize-winning author of Flights. Zanna Sloniowska writes beautifully, with empathy, sensitivity, and with real political impact, an important new voice in Polish literature. And the other one I think is really very fitting. Remarkable, a gripping Livian evocation of a city and a family across a long and painful century. A novel of life and survival across the ages. So, Zanna, you're very welcome here.
Good evening. Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here. It's a great honor to be here. Shall I read? Just before I will read a fragment from my book, I want to tell that this text has been written before the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine and before the Russian-Ukrainian war, before the full-scale invasion. All was made up. To me, the word mama is not an image, but a sound. It starts in the stomach, moves through the lungs and the larynx to the windpipe and sticks in the throat. "You are devoid of musical talent," she often said to me, so I never sing. Yet the voice that is born deep inside of me is her voice, a mezzo-soprano. In fact, when I was inside her, I thought that voice belonged to me, but once I was born, I found it was hers alone. This musical separation of ours lasted 12 years until the day she died. For a long time after, there was nothing, no sound, no color, just a hole right through by the shoulder blade. And when I finally grew up, I realized that now it was she who was inside me. Now she can't see anything. She is just a voice again, a beautiful mezzo-soprano, while I stand in vain before the mirror, opening my mouth and trying to bring it out of me. On the day of her death, her voice rang out, drowning many other raucous sounds. Yet her death was not a sound but a color. They brought her body home wrapped in a large blue and yellow flag, the flag of a country that did not yet exist on any map of the world. She was tightly shrouded in it like an Egyptian mummy, though in one spot on the surface, a dark blood-red stain was breaking through. As I stood and stared at that stain, I was struck by the feeling that someone had made a mistake. At school, they'd explained to us that every flag is red because they are all steeped in the blood of heroes. They told us the story of the worker who was shot dead when he came onto the street to fight for his rights with a white flag. When the gendarme fired their bullets, his blood dyed the fabric red. But since then, everything has changed. And now I knew that the color red more often brought terror than liberation. And yet, as I stood over Mama's body, I couldn't help thinking that red would have been more fitting. The red flag was solemn and tragic. The blue and yellow one was relaxed and kitschy. It made me think of a hot summer's day, of a rural rest in the fields. Mama said that the blue was the sky and the yellow was the corn. There are moments in life when strange, if not highly incongruous thoughts occur. If Mama had known that what I was thinking, she'd have been horrified. And so, seconds later, when the man who'd brought her home unwound the flag to show us the ragged wound near her shoulder blade, I stopped focusing on the colors and started to think about her skin. Mama used to undress in front of a tall mirror, never making me feel in the least embarrassed, and then she stands there naked, examining herself, often singing as she did so. I would sit nearby, visually stroking her white, freckled skin, her small, firm breasts, and her long legs corded in a little red hair. She was my own personal snow queen, as well as all the naked Venuses and clothed Madonnas rolled into one from the albums on the bookshelves. Her body spoke of the fact that it was indeed the spirit, and it would have been perfect, if not for a certain flaw. On her back, near her left shoulder blade, there was a satin white impression the size of a maple leaf. The only bit of her skin that had no freckles. It looked like a crookedly sewn-on patch. I realized it was a defect, but I loved it best of all. I often asked Mama where it came from. "It's the scar from an enemy bullet," she'd say with a laugh. When I was very small, I took this answer seriously and imagined the enemies of our system, Soviet system, chasing her one dark evening, setting dogs on her, Mama hiding in a phone booth, and the bullet coming through the glass and smashing it into 1,000 sharp, glittering slivers, hailing down on her body as it slammed torpidly to the ground. But the truth was different. When she was a little girl, a chain of moles had appeared on her back, something like the birthmark Gorbachev had on his forehead, and the doctors had decided to remove them. That was how the satin hollow came to be there. So, when her body was brought home, wrapped in the Ukrainian flag, and unveiled before our eyes, my second thought was of that same bit of her skin. A real bullet had hit her right, freckled shoulder blade, and I realized that by doing so, it had brought about a certain symmetry between the satin hollow on the left and the gaping hole on the right. Just like my thought about the flag, this particular thought definitely was not appropriate to the situation. So I stood tense and motionless in the main room where, despite the glaring sunlight, every lamp was on, trying to wipe out all these unpalatable associations. This made a totally blank, white space appear in my head, like the freckle-free impression in her skin. But I had no idea if it was in the left or the right hemisphere of my brain. It was July 1988, and my mother had been killed in the unequal fight against Soviet totalitarianism. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the reading. Shall we have one more piece of music and then? Viktor Erofiev is a widely acclaimed Russian author who published several significant works in the 1980s Glasnost period and continues to write in Berlin today. Born in Moscow in 1947, Erofiev was the son of a high-ranking Soviet official, one of Stalin's personal translators for French, I believe. He spent many of his childhood years in Paris, where he gained exposure to literature that had been banned in the Soviet Union, while simultaneously studying great writers such as Nabokov and the Marquis de Sade. After completing his undergraduate schooling in Moscow during the late 1960s, Erofiev began working with the Institute of World Literature. He was extremely familiar with the strict USSR censorship policies. He made his first major literary contribution in 1979 when he helped complete a scandalous almanac called Metropole. But Soviet officials deemed the compilation as pornography of the mind and refused to publish it. To make matters worse, Erofiev was targeted as a dissident after his father had to resign from Stalin's crew, and so the Soviet government censored all of his work. He became an editor of the first Russian edition of Nabokov's work, as well as several other Russian literature anthologies, and frequently writes for The New Yorker. And in the past decade, he has also published an autobiography called The Good Stalin, and a collection of stories, De Profundis. It has been said that of all Russian writers, Viktor Erofiev has made among the most notable attempts to secure creative freedom and expand the limits of literature. And this is a theme that we've had, I think, throughout the whole Heinrich Böll Weekend so far, so I think it's really very fitting.
Let me start with Metropole, because Metropole gave me possibility to see Heinrich Böll in Moscow. He arrived there in 1980 just to save us from prison. We were something like 23 writers who made a real revolt against the Soviet Union censorship, against this terrible system, against all this shit. And Heinrich Böll, with his friend Lev Kopelev, organized an evening in Moscow just to say hello to us, that he support us, he liked what we did. It's a big almanac like this, published in French, in Russian, and in English in the United States. So because of his presence, it was really not very comfortable for the authorities to really to start killing us one after another. We had a lot of problems, but Böll was someone who helped us and someone who was a real friend. I remember this evening very well, of course, because it was such an unusual thing to see Heinrich Böll. In Russian, we say Heinrich Böll in a mild way. Heinrich Böll, we saw him one after another talking, and I was so enthusiastic about his books, about his way of being all time free and going against all ideas of unfreedom, positions, extremism, totalitarian extremism, and so on. He was just a nice, smiling, not very high person, and full of energy, was a little bit suffering phase because of, I suppose, some illnesses. But he was also happy that he is in Moscow with people who, like him, hate bad things and love good things. And this was not only just meeting, but we made several pictures. I think that one day I'll find possibility to send it here, and it will be in a museum, because it was not just 10 or 13 persons, it was 23. All of us came, and among them were our best poets, best prose writers, best philosophers, and so on and so on. Of course, many people already died, and this is a legend. But you know, in every history of Soviet Union, even in Russia, so the history of Russia, there is a chapter connected with metropole. And you know, sometimes even people say that it was the way to show that this power, Soviet power, is weak, because still they wanted to be very cruel to us, but we still were afraid. It was time when they looked like dying flies, you know, terrible people, and very close to the end of their regime. So Böll is just one of my, not only my favorite writers, but also favorite souvenirs of my life. Now, tonight, I'll try to read. First, I do not read very often in the church. That's why I don't know how I'll feel it, comfortable or not comfortable, because, you know, especially, of course, no, in the Orthodox Church, I don't think that even they allow me to read, because now the church is so much connected with Russian way of being under Putin. But here, I suppose it's okay. If you allow me to read it. Then the other thing is that, of course, I do not read my short stories in English. I am a Russian writer, and of course I used to read in Russian, and before the end of the Soviet Union, I was a samizdat writer, means that nobody wanted to publish me, and that's why I used to read pretty well. But after many years, I don't know, in English, don't know. But it will be the text which you'll be the first readers, because as you said very well, that I work sometimes for the New Yorker. So this is the text which is a chapter of my new book, Great Gopnik, and they just going to publish it. Great Gopnik is a book which was published in Germany, and it was really a kind of well-accepted book. There are two heroes in this book, me and Putin and me. It's a novel. Yeah, it's a crazy novel. But this chapter will be about Russian prison. So personally, I could go there. I hope that he'll go later, or probably not even in Russia, but somewhere else. He deserves it. And later on, I came here just after the presentation of, look, in the theater of Freiburg, there was already a spectacle, theater show after the book. I wrote the play, and it is something with, of course, connected with Russian-Ukrainian or Putin-Ukrainian war, and it is tragical. It's at the same time just to find a way to speak about Putin. It's necessary to find kind of a comedy of horror or horror comedy, because just to say you are terrible, you are shit, it's not enough. But comedy kills better, you know, and it works very well. We had opening several weeks ago, and so it continues, and I think it will be not only in Freiburg. Gopnik, because in every language it will be Gopnik, great Gopnik. Great Gopnik, it's a paradox, like the good Stalin, as you said. Good Stalin, because my father was his interpreter from the French language, and that's why, of course, in my early years, Stalin was kind of good Stalin. Well, here, great Gopnik means, Gopnik is a little nasty hooligan of the backyard, dark street. And to say great Gopnik, it's a paradox, but with his mentality, with his values, he is really a little hooligan, but he came up, who knows how, to the skies, and now he is doing terrible things, not only to Ukraine, but also to Europe, to humanity. He's a real monster. This chapter will be about. There's another book I wanted to show. This I write rather regularly for the German press, for Frankfurt Allgemeine, for Süddeutsche Zeitung, and so on and so on. And this is the book called Naked Russia. This is a book, my essays, and this is the book of, let's say, something very political. And in this book, which I hope also be translated in English, it's necessary to say that in January 22nd, I predicted the war, saying, attention, the war is coming in FAZ. And now Germans believe that I'm a prophet, but it's just not necessary to be naive. Sometimes it happens in Europe. Well, now, here, I will read this chapter from the book called Hope, just Hope. It's a rather big one, so I know that I have something like 15 minutes, right? More or less 15 and a half. No? No? Okay? And so I'll just, I'll try my best just to cut something just in reading, so that it will come to the end, because the end is more interesting than the beginning. At least I believe so. So again, this is not very often that I read in English. I'll see what will happen to me after that. So, hope. By day, I was at the doorway of our Moscow apartment. Where you off to? My wife shouted from the kitchen, aromatic steam of morning coffee coming towards me. Prison. What do you mean prison? Vladimir Central. They open a museum of famous prisoners. Wow, I want to come too. Take me with you. I am late. Kisses next time. On my numerous reporting trips around Russia, this one was truly unforgettable. Vladimir Vladimir it's a city. Vladimir is about 100 kilometers east of Moscow. A drift, you would think, but transformation makes place there. It is the eternal Russia, the world of European scenery, naked, turning blue in the Siberian winds. I finally figured out the secret of the Russian soul. Here how it happened. I drove up to the gate of Vladimir Central, created on the order of Catherine the Great. It was a typical 18th century German prison. It was early morning, or early spring, or late autumn. Actually, we almost never have early autumn. The snow comes right away. The Empress's prison regulation recommend watching the prisoners firmly at all time, but treating humanity. The prisons were branded, heavy wooden blocks hung around their necks and flogged. Under Alexander II, an additional building was constructed for political prisoners. In 1864, it was filled with Polish insurgents. The heavy blocks were replaced by light shakets, which led to the prison opening. Which led to the prison opening its own workshop. The then government of Vladimir boasted that the local shakers were better than those made in Warsaw and St. Petersburg. Indeed, they are still used today. The center opened the gate, thickly covered with barber wire like ivy, and two colonels walked briskly to my minibus. "We are waiting for you," they said with smiles. "Oh yes," they confirmed, seeing my confusion. "We are waiting for you. Give us your passport." I took out my passport. "Where do we start?" "With showing your ass. When you remember it for the rest of your life. For some reasons, in all prison humiliation, the one people recall most often is bend over, spread your legs, spread your cheeks. Why are our Russian people so ashamed to show their assholes? What about a cup after your trip? Strong tea, the blonde colonel said. Black with lemon, exclaimed the dark one. Like merry mission makers, they slapped me on the door and lent me to drink tea. Who said that their animals were welcoming, animated, hospitable? But perhaps a little bit of cognac. They had already taken a bottle from the closet that held a lot of rolls of paper. I shook my head slightly. After tea, the dark-haired one stayed in the office, and the blonde commander in charge of culture and education dragged me into his office, the smaller but also full of rolls of paper. The walls were hung by sports certificates and pennants. A winter's cap with a red star stood on the windowsill. A little bit of history to start, if you don't mind, the colonel sent me with gentle smile. The first Russian hard labor prison, called Central, was established in Vladimir after the 1905 revolution. It mainly held political prisoners, terrorists and revolutionaries of all kinds of rank and colors. After the February Revolution of 1917, all the Polish prisoners were released from Central. In November of the same year, the Bolsheviks who had come to power promised to liquidate all prisons, the cursed legacy of Tsarism. It was even decided to close Vladimir Center, but very soon it turns out that the Soviet power had endless enemies. They still began to fill up quickly with anarchists, social revolutionaries, Menshevik, white guards, landlords, priests, peasants, and even representatives of Lenin's favorite proletariat. In the early 1920s, Vladimir prison received the status of a political isolator with the labor department. Now I pass later to... So first of all, they decided me to show their library there. Locks were cheerfully opened and shut. There were many bars, like in the movies. The cleanliness of the blue corridors was undescribable. We start with library. A guy who looked like Yesenin. Yesenin, it is a very good Russian poet of the 20s. He killed himself in 1925. A guy who looks like Yesenin immediately offered to read me his poems. A stunned woman came over. She was excited. She and Yesenin had arranged a small exhibit of my books. I wanted to take my books back. I hated that they were exhibited in Vladimir Central like prisoners. Revelations began. The colonel disappeared in thin air. The heavy woman told me that she couldn't imagine life without the prison. And of course, she is not a prisoner. She's just a free person who goes to work in and the guy who looks like a Yesenin is a prisoner. She couldn't imagine life with a prison. The humans were like family. Well, they were all her children. There were tears in her eyes, blue Russian lakes of tears. And what the first conjecture stirred in me, I thought the director of the prison library, this woman with hair curls, was the progenitor of this cosmos. Only I didn't know yet what I should do with this guess. Yesenin whispered in my ear that he was in for murder, the murder of his girlfriend, and then the whole story came pouring out while the director put her arm around him and say, "When I am on vacation, I miss the prison." "Help me," Yesenin said, handing me his poetry. I thought he wanted to get out, but he said, "Help me get them published." "You wouldn't believe this," the librarian said, "but we had our prison communism, a time of abundance. The 60s were particularly golden years for Central. We had our own manufacturing. We made shopping and beach bags, which were in grand demand. We made wooden chess pieces. There they are." She nodded at the chess table. The white and black figures were grim and helpless. Then everything changed after 1991, means the end of the Soviet Union. Production was curtailed. Unfortunately, underfunding became chronicle. In order to feed and to clothe the prisoner, the prison director and his deputy had to beg for help. The prison was terribly indebted to surprise. The day when the bakery stopped deliveries, how can you leave the prisoners without bread? The authorities had to turn to thieves-in-law, professional criminals, for help. They used their money to buy bread. So now it's, she tells me that now it's better. Then I start to go around the prison, and here we came to this museum of the famous, or to this famous, this is an absolutely crazy thing, to have museum of famous prisoners in the prison. This is a very special Russian idiotism. Who hasn't been in our prison, explained the colonel in a happy voice. The Germans, the Japanese general, prime minister and dissidents, and Stalin's son, Vasya Stalin. Here assembled his father. I looked at the portrait of Vasya. A tough grimace, sharp eyes, and the face is indecisive. Not like his father. You can tell he is an alcoholic. The veteran who is explaining me what's going on in the museum, veteran entered into his role as our guide. Stalin's son, Vasily, was brought here in 1955 under the name of Vasily Vasilyev, but the documents indicated his real surname, and they couldn't keep the cat in the bag. He was a good man, nothing bad could be said about him. He followed the regimen, never complained. They kept him better than others. They laid a wooden floor in his cell, gave his hospital food. He was not a healthy man. Then they brought him to work in the workshop. He became a good turner. He exceeded the plan. We used to deliver food to the building in tanks, but he designed a special cart which is still used to carry food today. The original cart used to stand here under his portrait, but then they decided that it was not dignified. After all, he was a famous military pilot, a lieutenant general, and Khrushchev himself was afraid of him. At the end of 1945, center was overcrowded with prisoners of war. The blonde colonel took over the narrative. Most of them were Germans. Over time, the lower-ranking officers were transmitted to camps. Only the big wigs remained in prison. Field Marshal von Scherdner, Hitler personally, Security Chief Rettenhuber, Intelligence Chief Pickenbrock, Germans and Japanese were disciplined people. There were no problem with them. Benning, who commanded the defense of Berlin, is well remembered here. He was old and ill. He died here. Then Field Marshal Kreis died. He was wrapped in a blanket and burned in the cemetery. And sometime later, they called from Moscow saying that a commission from the German embassy was coming. They ordered Christ to be exhumed, dressed in a uniform with awards, and burned in the coffin. Russian way of being with dead people. But the corpse has already begun to decompose. They drag him to the stable and sort of dress him. But the embassy people didn't even ask about the Field Marshal remains. The veteran picked up the story. Somewhere under their surnames, some numbers. So even we didn't understand who is incarnated here. In 1952, there are 32 numbered prisoners in solitary confinement. According to the rules, the wardens were not supposed to know their names. Only prison chief and deputies were allowed to talk to them. tutti, just coming to the end. To the end. So they proposed me to try the prison food, but they, of course they lied. And now I read you what happened to me very quickly by the end of it. It will be not long. So, about the hope.
Actually, we could come to the hope in the discussion.
Well, I think that just several lines, and then we'll have time to discuss. So I entered the hall, and I saw hundreds of wives of murders and other horrible crimes were on me. So they asked me to enter, and I recalled the colonel's opening word in his office with all his rolls of paper. We have 1,500 especially dangerous criminals, member organized crime organization, killer, and so on and so on. The audience did not smell of sweat. There was a strange atmosphere of great human disappointment. I had the sense that the people before me were being deceived. I want to tell you, I said, about hope. Yesin stooped in the doorway, arm crossed over his chest. Apparently, he was entitled to special treatment. Hope, I said, is the most dangerous enemy of a man in trouble. I felt that the whole started to notice my existence. I said that the hope wears out straight, that it lies at the man before it leaves him, that it is really to drive him to disease, madness, suicide. I said that it happened to me. It didn't involve prison, I said, but it was still involved death. And suddenly I felt a rumble of approval rising in the hall. It was coming from murders and other terrible crimes. We understood each other. We were part of the single cosmos, our sweet Russian cosmos, where the director of the prison library cries when she was on vacation, she missed prison. And then, bright as a comet, a conjunction finally visited me. We are the people of the prison cosmos. Prison is our homeland. Prison is our freedom. Prison is our language. Prison is the heart of our identity. Don't denigrate prison. High Brown and Creature write all sorts of nasty things about prison. They are not our people. And I see that after my talk, a few minutes came over, some intimates came over very simply and shook my hand like free men. I realized how aristocratically wrong Chuchev, our great poet, has been with his poem, Russia cannot be understood by the mind. It certainly can, but you need a different mind, not Chuchev's. The colonels were also happy. They clapped me on the back again and repeated, "Well said." Translated by Antonina Buis, very nice translator, American translator. Okay. Thank you.
I feel this weekend has been especially about topics such as war, death, prison, fighting, military, and I had hoped to kind of discuss also topics such as moving to another country, finding refuge, but I think maybe we should, the time has passed on to some extent, But also there is a question, and I think in the context of Heinrich Böll, to what extent can literature give us a new insight in times of war, in times of aggression, in times of a situation where we often don't know what we can do and we feel somewhat helpless. And I would like to ask you, Jana, where do you think you can have a role? What is the impact of your writing in our times of war?
So I have no idea about my impact, but what I can say that literature is somehow a mysterious thing, because as I said, I was writing this novel, The House with the Stained Glass Window, in about more than 10 years ago, and writing this, the story about the body of my mother wrapped in a yellow-blue flag, I could not imagine that in a couple of years we will see those bodies wrapped in the flag and the killed people. And now it's very common on war. So it's for me it was even a sort of prophecy I was very much surprised with, that we, writing literary texts, we can somehow predict some things. Also we can give names to some events. We can ask some questions that maybe they don't have the answer, so maybe they don't have one answer, but still it is important to ask some questions. And what can I say? Because it's a very general question. But you know, when I was listening to this short story about Russia as a big prison, I think it is in some way this text of Viktor Yerefeev is very precise, because I was born in 1978 in Soviet Union, in the western part of Soviet Union, and from my very beginning I was very much afraid of the prison of Gulag. Nobody told me about that, but that was somehow in the air. So that you could be sentenced just for nothing, just for one thought, or just for whatever. I was really, as a child, full of fear. And then the Soviet Union collapsed. I was quite young. Everyone was happy in my family, the friends. We were naive enough to believe that this big gulag is over, and now that freedom starts, the borders are open, the new life starts, but somehow now I am in my 40s, and it still exists, and it still threatens, and it kills people. This big prison, big gulag, which Russia brings to the world. So what else can I say?
No,
because those are the big questions here.
Absolutely. And Victor, you have already pointed out you met Heinrich Böll, and he had clearly quite an impact and very important role in your life. Jana, what do you connect with Heinrich Böll? If I may just...
So with Heinrich Böll, I can mention 3 episodes, because so in Soviet Union, I think his prose has been used because he was quite suitable. They considered him as a suitable for the Soviet idea, which was completely not true. But that means that Heinrich Böll's novels were available in Russian language. So when I was very young, I read some of them, and I was quite delighted with the clown, with the group portrait, with a dame, with a lady, and some else. So they were available. They are very humanistic. They are very well written. So yes, I do remember that. Then the second episode is, so I think I am influenced by his writings even. But the second episode is that when I moved to Poland, suddenly I found in Polish language, in Polish bookshop, I found Heinrich Böll's novel, which I never heard about. And the name of it is, if I'm not mistaken in English, The Angel Was Silent, or The Angel is Silent. I've never heard about this in this Russian canon of Böll's books. I bought it, and it was brilliant. It was somehow different. And then I'm a big fan of German writer Sebald. And in his natural history of destruction, he very often mentions this novel of Heinrich Böll, because it is about this bombardment by Allies of the German cities in the World War II. So again, that was a new discovery, but because if I'm not mistaken, this text of Heinrich Böll for a long time was not available, at least in the translations.
Not in German either. It
No,
was
not in
published
Germany
later,
as well. So look, we can still discover Heinrich Böll. And the third episode was very sad for me because a couple of months ago I was a guest of the International Writers Festival. It was European Festival of like many European writers came to India, to New Delhi and Kolkata. They were invited guests. And there was a German writer, a woman my age, and it was just a small talk, and I asked her about Heinrich Böll, just something, have you read and do you love, something like this. And she said, oh no, no, not at all. So happily we don't have him anymore in our school canon, in our school program. We got rid of him because we are tired of those old white guys. She was my age. And so I must say I was quite shocked. Yeah. So I know we have some Germans here, so they can confirm or we can discuss later, right? Is it a very good idea to get rid of Heinrich Böll, and what will happen next?
I don't think so. I think we can answer that very quickly. I think we just say no. I think we do need Heinrich Böll, possibly more than ever now. And I'd like to go back to your chapter was entitled Hope. Where do you see hope today?
Nowhere.
Okay.
Nowhere, really. I think that what's going on now in the world, that we have invasion of stupidity coming from all sides. And what kind of hope we could have with this stupidity. It comes from Russia, but I was in America. Totally right about this story. I was in America now in California, just came back. And a professor from, not Californian professor, but another one from another state, he said there was a revolt of students in the literary department, and they also they said that we are not going to read anymore with white old writers. Exactly so as you said. And so rector came up, the boss, and he said, for instance, whom? And the students say, for instance, Homer. Yeah. You know, white old guy. You know, we are going to not treat. You know, so you know this problem. Really, when I say it, it's terrible with stupidity. You know, probably Americans are stupid in a smart way, in their own smart way. Could be, but you know, but with Homer, I do not agree with them. The other thing, so thank you really also for nice opinion of the prison. In Russian soul, unfortunately, it is there since centuries. And about writers, you know, there is a big difference between journalists and writers. Journalists, they are looking for way out. So in any text of a journalist should be a kind of result. It could be different, but results should be there, and so the way out. But with writers, to some extent, they are looking for the way in. Totally different role. You know, and when they open the door, if they can do that, so they invite readers to the room where there are a lot of interesting things. If the writer is talented, and they could say, this I like, this I do not like at all, I hate your ceiling, but the floor is good, and so on and so on and so on. So writers, if really he or she is writer, he brings, if we speak about hope, he brings freedom, you know. Freedom is kind of hope. And in this freedom, you start think yourself, not with the book, but because you're in this room, you know. And I have nothing against journalism, but it's just different professor. And I say, Victor, are you a political writer? I say, political writer doesn't exist, such a person, because then it's a journalist, you know. So when you write books, energy comes not from you, but inside you, also interesting. And this is a mysterious thing. Really also, Jean was right to say that literature is mysterious. And it's very difficult to work on it and to look for the understanding. Because if you start to work with it, you will lose your inspiration. You will lose this mysterious thing. So it's like a papillon, like without this, and you can't fly anymore. You know, and this is something which gives us some hope that there is something more than we feel in this materialistic world. I don't speak about church. Sometimes it's more materialistic that we are. But still, I believe that there are interesting in literature, and literature is still some kind of, if it's good, it's a good food, but not for stomach, but mind. And it's better to eat good literature, not bad one.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, no, I.
Thank you.
And I think there are solutions within creativity, whether it's in literature and in novels, in poetry, and finding new perspectives and in enlarging our points of view, our experiences, and it's literature that can do that so much better than anything else. But I am also aware that we had kind of set about 1.5 hours, and I really wanted to give a chance to the audience to ask some questions as well to our two writers here who have both unique insights, and this is your chance to ask or comment briefly, hopefully. Yeah?
So what can I say? I am moving to Nairobi in August. This is one thing, and the second thing, I must say that, for example, being in India, in literary festival, where 300 or 400 writers invited, and only 3 or 4 of them are Europeans, that was a great experience for me. So this switching, this center, it is very helpful indeed. Like this is my personal, very personal experience. I found it kind of, as you said, relaxing nowadays.
Well, you know, what could I say? I love Africa because it's a real, very special experience there. I started to love it when my brother was ambassador to Senegal and the Gambia, you know, and I started to travel in these countries. It was just a miracle. But later on, the German asked me to write about 5 rivers. It was starting with Volga, and then Rhine, and then Mississippi, and the Ganges, and finally it was a river I decided to describe in the African rivers called Niger, or Niger in French. And you know, that was a real experience. My goodness, so many cultures, and so many different ways of being, of thinking. But it was, at the same time, it was quite dangerous because my Arabic driver decided that I'm selling arms, and they put me just in front of a wall and decided to kill me, you know, with Kalashnikov, with Russian machine gun. And I said, well, and the funny thing was that at the same time, my telephone rang. And I said, hello. And someone said, Victor, we'll be very pleased if you come to our osteria in Moscow. We have very fresh oysters. I'm not kidding. And I had Kalashnikov in front of me. I said, thank you very much, I'll call you later. And my guide, because that was, you know, in East Mali, it was the war between Malaysian and Arab, so it's known. So my Mali guide arrived at the moment when I really was just being to be killed. And also it's very interesting that I heard this animals in the yards, meow, cow, wow, you know, it's just like something like operetta, but not for me. And so he arrived, this guy, and he said, it was for real, and he said, look, I know your grandmother, he said to him. And he said, how? And they started to speak, and then he said, Victor, it's okay. Give him some money and let's go. I have in my pocket $5, just also from America. I gave him $5, he was happy. And I thought, my goodness, my life costs only $5.
Good. Life can be cheap. Any other questions? Then I would ask our 2 wonderful musicians, John Butler and Diarmuid Gilty, to play us one more tune. I want to thank before that really very much Jana and Victor for your contributions and for coming here. before I forget it, I want to point out that tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock on the dot, the meeting is at Ted's, where the bus will leave for the walk with Owen Halpin. So don't forget, 10 o'clock, really on time, very important. And I think we can just enjoy the music now, and I think also the audience for you being here and contributing, and for the whole weekend, everyone who has contributed so far, thank you so much.